Welcome to the Benefits Boost,
where we bring game-changing ideas to you,
the people shaping the future of benefits.
Let's jump in.
Hey, Tammy.
Hi, Vlad.
It's nice to have you here today.
It's great to be here.
So we've got Tammy Shweiger. She is a mindful money coach, a CPA. I should have said a certified money coach, which is its own designation that you had to take a really big test for, and a yoga teacher. And we're speaking today because actually you and I go way, way back. Tammy's actually one of my best friends from college, but we've invited you here today because our mission and this podcast is to bring kind of the ideas that are on the edges, that are kind of getting early adoption, that are going to get into the mainstream in the next 5 years or so. And we want to accelerate their adoption. And I think what you're doing is incredibly important. I've loved your work. Full disclosures, I've also done a little bit of coaching with Tammy on the side to help her get this off the ground, which has been really, really fun and fulfilling. But part of the reason why it's fun and fulfilling is because Tammy is tackling this concept that when we talk about financial planning and thinking about sort of this holistic picture for an employee, a person, on how their whole life is going to develop around their finances, we often actually leave out the most important part, which is the emotional part. And Tammy is, I think, one of the really like the bleeding edge practitioners on this topic and has had really trailblazed her way into a very new domain that's now, I think, starting to get picked up quite a bit. This podcast is sponsored by, well, Airbo. We make benefits education simple and engaging and free. We really believe that everyone should have access to wonderful benefits education so that your employees have all the resources they need to thrive using your programs. And let's be honest, so that you don't get all that employee noise. You can sign up for our free AI tool, free microsite, and lots of other great stuff at airbo.com/free. So Tammy, thank you so much for being here. I'm incredibly excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
So to just start off with a little like softball for you, How would you kind of explain the thing that makes your perspective on the world when it comes to this subject really different than, the contrast that you're up against? What is like the old way to think about this, the new way that you've brought to the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, I should start by saying there are other people out there doing what I'm doing. They have different titles, different names. Like, we're doing the work, but there are very few of us. And because of that, it's not really known by, let's say, mainstream financial wellness that this profession with its different names exists. Like, I've had people say to me, I wish I had met you 20 years ago. And I say, this didn't exist 20 years ago. So it would have been hard for me to help in that way. What's different is that we grow up thinking that money is about math, that you need to be good at math to be good with your money. You need to be disciplined. You need to be focused. That works later, but if you can't regulate your emotions, if you don't address your emotions and your lived experience, it won't work. Math won't work. Discipline won't work. And I think that keeps a lot of people stuck and frustrated.
It's a great summary of what's so radically different about your perspective. It's really not like financials are actually not about math so much as it is about emotion first. I think it's a bit of a radical statement in a lot of ways in this industry because, we're obviously coming at this from like the benefits lens, and the financial piece hits a lot. Like, yes, obviously retirement, like contributing to your 401k, but with benefits becoming so much more like consumer driven as a whole, where people are part of high deductible health plans and they have to decide how to like use their FSA and a bunch of other things that where you're basically making financial decisions. I think there's one lens, the traditional actuarial lens, that has been very much like macro, micro 101, like economics, right? Like you do this and people are just a perfect machine and they just like will do this output. Like absolute BS, right?
Yeah,
doesn't actually work.
It doesn't. We're not calculators. We're not spreadsheets. I had a really hard time with economics in college. I had to take macro and micro for my accounting degree. I struggled a lot with it and I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it was because it didn't make sense to me. There was this whole other piece of psychology and neuroscience, like even a mathematical question, right? Like this person contributes this amount and then this is what they do and it leads to this, but it doesn't because there's so many other factors that actually contribute to what somebody will do in their actual life. 401ks are a really good example. I think the most important thing to remember about 401ks is that they didn't exist before 1978, 1980. Now people's futures, people's retirements are dependent on something that they need to start thinking about in their 20s that's going to affect them in their 60s or their 70s. And we did not evolve to understand that concept at all. It's 50 years old, right? Our brains don't get it. Our brains don't understand credit cards. Our brains don't understand virtual transactions. So we really need to deal with that truth first before we think about how to help people make the decisions that are going to be best for them.
So I'm having this moment. It's kind of interesting. In a lot of cases, when I have one of these conversations, I have a perspective on it and I kind of get the so what. And I feel like the conversation is leading to an area that I generally understand. I really don't get where this leads, actually. So that's one of my goals for this conversation. I want to better understand where this leads. There was this whole period where everyone got really excited about behavioral economics in the benefits industry. I was like a part of that. I was like, oh my God, behavioral economics, incentivize people to like do stuff and it's nonlinear and whatever. Like it seemed to start kind of weaving in some of the concepts that you're implying. But intuitively, I'm kind of hearing like this is a bit different. Do we kind of understand the difference between behavioral economics and what you're speaking about? I'm trying to kind of anchor it in things that have gone on in the industry and kind of where this fits in, if at all.
If what I'm doing is different from behavioral economics.
Yeah, is it kind of like behavioral economics?
It's influenced and informed by, I would say. I think that's what makes this. So this profession isn't really, it wears many hats. People come from many different backgrounds and they bring whatever their professional background adds to that. Like, for example, for me, it's my CPA. And then they layer on what they feel is going to best serve the people that they're working with. So I definitely use behavioral economics. I use it's therapeutically informed coaching and really helping people work through their emotions before we get to the practical pieces.
Say more.
Everyone has a different lived experience when it comes to money. Everyone has like a first money memory. You have a first money memory. I have a first money memory. The first time we remember something about money. And we have different major life events and memories around money. And those memories, those experiences are going to cause us to make different decisions in our adult life. Informing ourselves about the connection between our early life and our adult life can allow us to make informed, sustainable change. Most of our core beliefs about money are formed before the age of 7. That's before we understand things like mortgages, retirement, credit cards, right? It's when we're picking things up from often our nuclear family, our caretakers, our parents. And we're picking those things up often through conversations we're overhearing, through maybe energy that we're just absorbing. We're absorbing the emotions of the people around us, because as kids, that's what we're picking up on. We're looking around trying to figure out if our parents, our caretakers can keep us safe. Money is deeply tied to safety. So we're absorbing all that. We don't totally understand that that's informing our relationship with money. And that's true for lots of other things, right? Like our core beliefs are set before the age of 7, not just our core beliefs about money, which kind of brings us back to neuroeconomics. If we don't understand that truth, if we don't look at that, then in our adult life, we're going to be making choices in our day-to-day life that are based on those core beliefs without knowing it. And if those aren't helpful core beliefs, then we're making a lot of choices that we're not aware of.
Anytime you start talking about emotion, as we've joked, woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
People start putting boundaries around it. It's like, oh, but this person isn't like me. And one of the, I think, really interesting things about you, Tammy, is that you came out of a very corporate, traditional accounting background, having worked for one of the big accounting firms, having a CPA, and then realized that wasn't it. What I kind of like, I'm hoping that we can draw a line like from that experience to this career that you ended up in, and then kind of linking it to the so what's as to like how, over like $1 trillion of spend flows through employers. That's not even including retirement accounts. And there's so many implications to maybe how employers want to rethink how they engage employees in all these things that touch money ultimately. If I go to the ER or the urgent care or the PCP or like make the right decision, right? So many of these things have to do with money. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about, we both went to UConn. We were in the same dorm.
Yep.
Take us from there maybe, or wherever you want to go.
So I think like where I was when we met, which was as an accounting major at UConn, comes back from my early money story. I'm a first generation American. There was a very limited, I was made to feel like there were a very limited amount of options that were suitable for me for my career, right? Something that is extremely secure and extremely stable and respected is probably the only thing that was appropriate. So it was like doctor, lawyer, engineer, or maybe accountant. I was like, all right, I'll go with accountant. So I chose something to do potentially with the rest of my life, right? Like, of course, we can change careers, but there's a very linear path that requires a lot of financial and time commitment to get your CPA. And I chose that without really being connected to what made me happy or what I was interested in, and I was interested in people and what makes them do what they do. So I did that. I trudged along for a decade. And it's really hard to do something well that you don't want to do, right? It sucks a lot of energy out of you. So I could only go so far before I really just decided I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not happy. I can't do this. I joined a yoga teacher training program. We're talking a lot about wellness in that program, right? Looking at wellness through lots of different perspectives. Started teaching, and I'm standing up in front of a class of yoga students talking about non-judgment, talking about compassion, talking about examining the ego, talking about focusing on what's going on your mat and not your neighbor's mat. All of that is applicable to personal finance. That was the light bulb that went off for me of that's the piece it was the piece missing in my personal life. And it was, I think, the piece missing in finance. That set me on the path to kind of figure. I got a certified money coaching. I got that certificate and I started my practice. And really what proved to me that there's a huge gap in the way we help people financially is with the work that I'm doing in my clients. People who have been struggling for decades are finally being able to connect their emotions and their lived experiences to their finances and seeing it work. Seeing somebody be able to make changes that they haven't been able to make for 30 years.
I love the aha moment of, even what you said, I can imagine you being in like that yoga teacher training and being like, wait a minute, like, yeah, don't look at someone else's financial picture. Look at your own. The mat is the financial. So there's clear analogies. Maybe like what's like a story that comes to mind that you think like best illustrates this in practice?
So I'm just going to think about a client that I saw earlier this week. So she's in her 30s. So this wouldn't be decades of change, but she's really been in debt in and out. And this is very frequent, in debt in and out her whole life. And
like credit card debt, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Credit card debt is what I know. I mean, student loans is a whole, separate thing, credit card debt. And one big thing that we worked on at the beginning, and this is where math may not always be the answer, right? So this is an example, is if we're going to pay off credit card debt, right, we might go with the math and say, well, one credit card has a really high interest rate. That's the card we're going to pay off. This particular person had a credit card that was opened without her consent by a parent, and a lot of debt was racked up on that card, right? So she still had that card. The debt, most of it, all of it was hers at this point. But that's a form of financial abuse. That card held a lot of emotion, betrayal, shame. If we're going to decide what card to tackle first, we're not, of course, I'm always going to ask the client what they prefer, but we're going to honor the fact that what she's most motivated to work to pay down is the card that was opened without her consent. And that's going to be empowering for her to work on paying off more and more debt. I mean, another big one that I mean, of course, it's very specific depending on numbers, but generally, I don't advise people, this is probably a little controversial, but
Good.
I don't advise people who are in debt, mostly credit card debt, high interest debt, when they get a cash windfall. And of course, this is where it's dependent on how big the cash windfall is in comparison to the debt. But let's say they're about the same. I do not advise them to pay down the debt at all with the cash windfall.
Why?
Because that will keep them in a cycle of debt, right? They're feeling scarce. They're feeling unsafe. They're feeling insecure, right? They don't have a lot of cash in their bank account. They have all this debt. If they take that cash and they put it towards the debt, they will end up exactly where they were before. Something else will come. Something will happen. Their car will break down. They will need a procedure and they won't have the money, and they'll end up taking out more loans, adding more debt, and feeling the emotions of shame and failure. And this is never going to get better. And I'm not not going to bother. If we focus on not adding to the debt, that's important, not adding to the debt, living beneath the income that we're bringing in, and then using that cash to pay for the things that we know are coming, that builds a totally different set of neurons in our brain of positive reinforcement. I can do this. I'm doing it.
What do you think is the implication for how employers talk to their employees about this stuff? Like, I know you've been doing a bunch of work in this area, because I'm sort of like envisioning, like, we do a bunch of financial education for our clients. We have like a standard campaign around it, but that's a pretty standard thing that most organizations will cover at some point of the year is financial wellness, financial well-being.
Yeah. But what does that mean? What does financial education cover? What does financial wellness